I studied abroad at the University of Capetown in South Africa. I'm a political science and psychology double major, so the classes I took there kind of had a mix of both science and social science. It was definitely a different experience going to the University of Capetown because it was massive. I think there's like 40,000 students as compared to the 6,000 here at Santa Clara University. It was really fascinating to get an inside look at different kinds of university experiences. So I got to experience being in a classroom with 300 students. And I found out that that's not actually my best way of learning because I enjoy participating in discussions and there wasn't really as much opportunity for that. I chose personally to live in flats that would integrate me with individuals of that particular culture. So a lot of the American students that studied abroad at the University of Cape Town chose to live in basically the American apartments. I declined that because I didn't want to be in an American bubble. While I was abroad, I really wanted to integrate myself and experience the culture. Something that I really found out about the students at the University of Cape Town is they were all highly motivated. Everyone was super intellectual and involved, really driven to make a difference. They saw educational opportunities as a privilege, whereas in America, we tend to see it as a requirement or a necessity. A compulsory thing that we have to do, and it's a burden to us. But for them, it was exciting. It was invigorating. It was a chance for them to better themselves, and by better themselves, they would better the world as a whole. And I thought that that was really inspiring for me in my own studies. So when I went abroad to South Africa, I did a little bit of research ahead of time, not as much as I should have. Discovered that apartheid ended in 1994 and the transition was over. And so I had this idea that South Africa was, a complete democracy now and all of its issues had been resolved. And that, they were this nation of unity and all the races had come together and there were no more issues. I was hit with the harsh reality that that was not the case. And on campus, that became blatantly clear. A lot of the students, they were very involved in the politics and the social justice issues and the civil rights issues. It was all an issue for them because it was really prevalent in their lives. And they faced daily discrimination and prejudices. There is still so much systematic injustices present in the society. Even though the legislation technically eliminated all of the racist laws that were in place, they didn't eliminate the implicit racial injustices and the economic disadvantages that blacks were put at by being deprived of their rights for so long. And so then because they were at this economic disadvantage, they were at an educational disadvantage. And because they were at this educational disadvantage, they were deprived of professional advantages. So it turns into this really nasty cycle of racial and social issues. That was a huge thing on campus and something that the students were fighting to change. They felt that the transition wasn't over and there was still a lot of work that needed to be done in their country. And soon you felt that this tension was growing and finally it erupted into these massive student protests. At first, classes were canceled for a day because of the protests and the riots. And that was crazy. And then day after day, class kept getting canceled and things kept getting postponed. And we weren't allowed to go on campus, finally. Students were being shot at with rubber bullets. Violence was used against them. People were being dragged out and jailed. 40 of my friends at University of Cape Town that I knew and that I studied with and that I ate lunch with on campus, they were thrown in jail. And all of a sudden, my RAs, which is equivalent to CFs here at Santa Clara, they were put in jail. And then we had no one to communicate with or talk to about these things that were supposed to be directing our movements. It had a huge impact on our day-to-day activities there. Even on my own living situation, because the workers went on strike because of the protests. The last 2 to 3 weeks of my experience there, I got moved to the American apartments. And so it just, it shook everything up. There was nothing that went untouched. The bus I took to go to campus every day was set on fire. Upper campus was set on fire. There were massive student protests everywhere. So students were poured into the streets and there were police with their batons that they were beating students with and their shields. And I literally felt like I was in the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s, but I wasn't. I was in South Africa in 2015, but it was still a civil rights movement. And I got to be part of history and I got to be part of change. That's an experience that I'll never forget and one that I took with me when I came back. I definitely experienced culture shock. However, it does not compare to the reverse culture shock I experienced when I came back. At UCT, yes, the protests were terrifying in their physicality and their tangibility, but what was most terrifying and what was most shocking was when I came back to Santa Clara and there was nothing. At UCT, all of the exams got canceled because of the protests, and so I ended up having to take my exams once I came back to Santa Clara in January. I didn't take them until week 3 or week 4, and at this point it had been months since I had last been in my classroom. That was really difficult, taking the exams here, because I hadn't been exposed to that material in a really long time. We take for granted the fact that I can go to class and the fact that my campus isn't set on fire. And so I think we really take all of those things for granted. The protest only ended because eventually the university caved and they said, okay, we'll pay our workers more and we won't increase pay rates for students this year. And I think the key term was this year. Students stopped the protest, but there was always the fear that they would try this again in the future, and it wasn't a completely resolved issue. And as is evident now, student protests have erupted again at the University of Cape Town and in South Africa because of these systematic injustices that don't just disappear. You can't just appease people by not raising rates one year, but then trying it again the next. I truly think that there's something really big politically on the horizon. I know when I was there, students talked about a revolution. They thought that that was necessary. They thought the people had been sedated for so long and that a lot of the issues had been swept under the rug, but that now people were quote unquote woke, basically just meaning that they were politically involved and educated and aware of the social injustices, and they wanted to make a difference. So I know students who are abroad right now, they're experiencing the same thing I did, and it's obviously still a real issue. Through social media, I've been able to get instant news updates because I still follow UCT News and South African news sources, and I read the articles, and a lot of my friends are now studying abroad there. I'm still encompassed by all of the South African politics. I don't think that the issues should no longer be relevant to me once I exit the country's borders. It's something I want to stay involved in.